Being queer and trans is hard enough on its own, but when you add religious trauma to the mix, things just get a whole lot more complicated. You're not only dealing with religious family members and oppressive religious system as a whole, but you likely have internalized homophobia and transphobia and general queerphobia. Today, I want to talk about why this can be so hard to deconstruct and a couple of tips on how to get started on your journey of healing. Hey everyone, welcome to Mav Magic. My name is Mav, and on this channel I like to help people find their truth and find their magic. If you enjoy content about non-binary identity, spirituality, or religious trauma, then this is a great channel for you to subscribe to. So if you could go ahead and just hit all those buttons for me, the algorithm definitely needs it. I would greatly appreciate that. But anyway, let's get started with the conversation. When I first realized that I wanted to do this video, I did a little bit of research on queer identity, transgender identity, and religious trauma. The amount of research that's out there is very minimal. Not only that, but the amount of content that exists on YouTube is like pretty minuscule as well. So I just wanted to come on here and share a little bit of my own experience and a little bit of things that I discovered through my own journey. So today I want to discuss how religious trauma impacts internalized transphobia and homophobia. I want to make it very clear that a lot of things that I'm going to be referencing refer very closely to evangelical Christianity. But these ideas tend to be very common around a lot of different religious systems, so I invite you to stick around even if you didn't deal with this particular religion. So the first impact of indoctrination is that you're taught a lot of rigidity around gender roles. We are taught that there is kind of a hierarchy within the family system. You have Jesus Christ or God who's at the head, then you have the father, and then after that you have the mother, and then you have the children underneath that. Within this system, there are a ton of rules that you have. The father is expected to do a whole bunch of things, and the mother is expected to do a whole bunch of other things. But this obviously starts before you get married or have children. We are taught that gender is destined by God at birth, and that once you're born as a specific gender, you don't have room to explore. So therefore, males are expected to act manly, and females are expected to be feminine. Not only are these things taught as important roles within the family system, you are taught that you are glorifying God by acting as you were assigned gender at birth. What comes to mind when I talk about this is your typical girl-defined YouTube channel talking about biblical womanhood and what that's supposed to look like. Another thing that I experienced is that play with gender is prohibited. And oftentimes there were very arbitrary rules about what was supposed to be considered masculine or feminine. I remember one time when I was interested in learning how to play the drums, and my mom said no because she thought that the drums were way too masculine. She preferred that I played the flute, which I tried, and I failed at. But we seemed to agree with the guitar because I learned how to play that, and apparently that was feminine enough. Impact number 2 is the moral superiority and the expectation to be in monogamous, heterosexual relationships and have kids. I remember thinking when I grew up that this was really the only right thing to do, even though I didn't really think that it was accurate or didn't really feel right for me. The other unwritten expectation is that you're supposed to be allosexual. You have to have some type of sexual attraction to someone else. So people who are on the asexual spectrum oftentimes feel left out of these narratives. You really have no room to explore in any different kinds of relationships. The other thing that's really important about this note is that its impacts are very far-reaching. You can see that this idea has impact on our legislation in America with abortion rights, as well as the pressure to adopt, which on a side note is just flooding an already overwhelmed system, which is just not an effective solution for the problem. The third issue is that you are indoctrinated to think that you are inherently flawed. And I know that this idea isn't technically directly linked to gender or sexuality, but it's very important. So this idea messes with your own sense of self-confidence and even the concept of self-love. Some people are taught that self-confidence and self-love are actually not godly things or are sinful. The knowledge that you are just inherently sinful kind of sits with you all the time. This pain was amplified for me when I discovered my queerness. I had this deeply ingrained fear that somehow my queerness meant that I would not be able to get to heaven. And this manifested for me as a core belief that if I was ever fully known, that no one would truly love me or accept me. And that is super problematic. I always walked around with that belief, believing really that I could never be loved. One of the really sad things though about this is that one of my greatest fears was that I would lose my family because of my queerness, and that eventually kind of happened, which is really, really crappy. And I want to make a side note for anyone who's watching this video who might have parents who they're living with and they might not be able to leave that system. I want you to understand that this really sucks. It is so hard to not have your family on your side and to even grapple with the idea of losing your family. And I'm really sorry that you're in that situation. I just want you to quickly know that you're not alone. Another concept that was taught with this idea was that if you did ever kind of live a queer lifestyle, that you would never truly be happy. There was a whole lot of conversation between Christians where they would say, oh, you know, I talked with this gay person, and when I spoke with them, they told me that they weren't really happy on the inside, and that tells me that they needed Jesus Christ. No, sometimes people are sad. Straight people get sad, Christians get sad, everybody gets sad, right? So they use this kind of language to manipulate you and manipulate your understanding. So now you might have an unconscious belief that you're not really allowed to be happy, or that really being happy, living a queer lifestyle is not going to be sustainable, which just isn't true. And the fourth issue here is that you're taught to mistrust your own feelings because they are of the flesh. What this means is that because you are inherently sinful, you can assume that your natural inclinations are faulty or flawed and really can't be trusted. And at the very worst, you might be taught that those natural inclinations are evil or demonic spirits or of the devil. So this manifests as a chronic mistrust of self, a lot of perfectionism, and a paralyzing fear of failure. So this can lead to you doubting your own sexuality or your lack of sexuality or your gender identity. Another idea that I'm considering, and this is nothing that is proven, it's just anecdotal, something that I believe that I noticed. I've noticed that chronic self-mistrust can lead you to be very susceptible to dangerous ideas and dogmatic ideologies. The ones that I'm thinking of specifically here are really harmful detransition narratives as well as trans-medicalist ideas. How this kind of connects is I think that unrelenting self-doubt can oftentimes lead people to listen to more harmful ideologies, and they can kind of grab on to those painful ideas and start casting them onto themselves and then also kind of projecting them onto others. If you are enjoying this content, I would really appreciate if you give this video a quick like. Go ahead and check my description to see what other kinds of things I'm up to, and give me a follow on my other social media platforms. Now I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to begin to heal internalized homophobia and transphobia. There really is no one rule to healing, but I believe one of the most important ingredients to add to this mix is experimentation and play. I think that adding a little bit of lightness and levity into life can really help us break free from those rigid rules that we were so used to following. The other thing is that it can be really scary to move into a space where you don't have any rules or regulations. You might feel really confused because you don't know what to do now. And that's one of the really helpful things about religion, is that it provides a ton of structure for people. So now that you might be either deconstructing your religion or now that you've left your religion, it's up to you to start to make these rules for yourself. So when you're doing this, I invite you to add a lot of lightness and play to them. Here are a couple of tips. Tip number one, you don't have to be trans to explore your gender expression a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I want you to stop pretending to be someone and just be who you are. The thing is, you might have to do a little bit of experimentation to figure that out. Number two is to experiment with relationships or not having relationships. Be honest with yourself or your partner or partners about your interests or your turnoffs. Also understand that you don't need to be in a traditional relationship at all. Tip number three is realize that you are not inherently flawed. You are who you decide you are. This can be especially complicated if you were born into a cult or some type of religious system. And this is because you were never really allowed to develop a sense of self at all. So one thing about cult members who join cults in adulthood is they typically have a pre-cult self to fall back to after they left that cult. But for someone like me, I never had a sense of self to begin with. So the key here is to allow yourself to surrender to the very slow process of self-discovery. You will learn new things about yourself every single day. Be patient and allow it to happen naturally. And tip number 4, practice self-trust. Learn to trust your gut. Your values and your opinions are really important. I know that people have told you for a very long time that those things don't matter, but I'm here to tell you that they matter very, very much. One thing that's scary about self-trust is that you're nervous because you don't have a lot of the safety and security that those rigid rules gave you. So you're really nervous about making mistakes. I know this because I experience it all the time. But if I can tell you one thing is, please learn to make some mistakes. Make mistakes as much as you can. Making mistakes, figuring things out, struggling is the only way that we learn. And the thing is that you can choose to learn what excites you. You are no longer that little indoctrinated kid that had to just sit there and allow all this information to just be thrown at you. You now have the autonomy to look into things that actually get you excited. So let that little ball of excitement guide you in the right direction. And once again, as you learn and try, you'll make mistakes. You'll change your mind. You'll realize that an idea that you held on to dearly no longer suits you anymore, and you'll let it go. You'll discover new beliefs that you never imagined that'll become very near and dear to your heart. This process can be scary and overwhelming, but it's one that is well worth the journey. I'm so very grateful that you chose to stick to the end of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. If you are looking for some practical one-on-one advice, you can work with me. Go ahead and check the link in description to book your free discovery session. But other than that, I hope you have an incredible day. Peace and love. I will see you next time.